Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 297, cover dated February 1993. So the cover caption here, Song's End. This in effect is the epilogue chapter of the 12-part X-Cutioner song crossover. On the cover here by Brandon Peterson, inked by Panosian, we have a shocked and surprised Jubilee being stood over by a mysterious figure in silhouette. Who is it? Well, let's open up the issue to find out. So we start with a splash page featuring the Beast and Archangel, and it is unclear where they're going on this splash page, but if we turn over to the next couple of pages, we will see that they have made their way from the X-Mansion to Harry's Hideaway, the pub bar that was destroyed in issue 294 when Caliban and the other horsemen of Apocalypse attacked the bar and abducted Scott and Jean. So that goes all the way back to chapter 1 of the crossover. So nice art on these pages by Brandon Peterson. I can see him growing over the course of his few issues on Uncanny X-Men. And let's take a look at the credits here. So the title of the story is Up and Around, and the creative team: Scott Lobdell, writer; Brandon Peterson, penciler; Dan Panosian, inker; Chris Eliopoulos, letterer; and Marie Javins, colorist. And something I want to say is, I think while I liked Terry Austin's inks on Peterson's pencils in the chapters of the Uncanny X-Men chapters of X-Cutioner's song, I think Dan Panosian is a better fit for Peterson, because the style that Peterson is going for, which is an imitation of Jim Lee, is much better suited to inks by Panosian here. So what's going on is that Hank and Warren are going to fix up Harry's Hideaway. And then the scene switches to the roof of the X-Mansion, and we've got Rogue sitting out. Now, why is she wearing these shades? It's because she's still recovering from being blinded by Strobe, a member of the MLF, in a previous issue of the crossover. So she's sitting out on the roof of the mansion alone, and who comes up behind her except for, well, cigarette smoking, kind of Cajun dialect phrasing. It's got to be Gambit, yes. And then he says to her, according to Dr. McTaggart, you're still recovering from the optic damage Strobe caused in X-Men number 15. She's restricted you to complete bed rest, so why is she out on the roof in the middle of the night? And Rogue is just not happy at all. She says to him, Remy, if you've any feelings for me, any at all, leave me alone. So he says, that's funny. My feelings for you are the very same reason I'm staying. So there's been, of course, some flirting and banter between the two. And then, of course, there was the revelation that Gambit had a wife, Belladonna, that he never told anyone about. And there hasn't been a conversation about that between Rogue and Gambit. So will there be in this issue or not? Well, let's turn the page and we shift to another scene. So it's still the middle of the night, and we've got elsewhere on the sprawling Westchester estate, Jubilee out rollerblading, and she's enjoying herself. Like she says, wonder why the rest of the X-dudes spend so much time moping. From here, it's got to be the coolest gig in the world. But she bumps into someone she wasn't expecting, and here on this full page image, it turns out to be Professor X, standing up, standing tall, with his shoes off and his feet on the grass. This is a beautiful splash page by Brandon Peterson. Great anchor image here of Jubilee as well. As I said a little earlier, his art has really improved over the course of these issues, and something that really is kind of like a motif through this issue is the play with the autumn leaves that are falling, and the shadows that they cast on Xavier's head, on his clothes, on his trousers there, on the back of Jubilee's coat. It's nice little attention to detail by Peterson and Panosian, and it looks nice visually. So that's it for the characters that are explored in this particular issue. It's a quiet issue. It turns out to be, this is the first time that Lobdell has done this. After a loud and noisy crossover, we have a quiet issue. Claremont used to do them as well, not necessarily after crossovers, but here we have Lobdell's version of it, and there really is no action in this issue. And indeed, when we come to the end of the issue, there isn't even a setup for the conflict coming in the next issue. There's no villains. There's only 6 characters featured here. The Beast, Archangel, Gambit and Rogue, and Professor X, and Jubilee. So we have these 3 stories running through the issue, and they're all vehicles for characterization and character development. So Beast and Archangel busy working on fixing up Harry's hideaway and reminiscing about their times past their own time as teenagers and students at Professor X's school. So here Beast is talking about, or he mentions the title of a work, The Use of Genetic Advancements in Practical and Commercial Employment. And this jogs Warren's memory. Why does that sound so familiar? And Beast tells him, it was the title of your term paper, junior year. You paid me $1,000 to write it in your stead. And of course, Warren, a rich boy, a multimillionaire, and of course he was in a position to do something like that. So Warren thinks back, smiling, saying, right, the same paper Professor Xavier changed his mind about the day it was due. We had to deliver our reports mentally. And Beast recalls, he called it an exercise in sonic projection. And as he works away, he says there, admittedly, you looked quite the ignoramus, standing in front of the class without a single original thought in your head, with the possible exception of why me? And Warren says, I think I was praying for the Sentinels to attack. How is it the professor always seemed to know everything? Honestly, Beast says, and then he confesses, in this particular case, I told him. You told him, but only after I cashed the check, and then he bursts out laughing. So, a humorous little moment there between these 2 old friends. And then we switch back to Jubilee and Professor X. Nice down shot here by Brandon Peterson. And again, that motif of the silhouetting of the leaves on the professor's head. And basically he explains why he's able to stand. Dr. McTaggart assures me this is a temporary after effect of Strife's techno-organic virus until it burns itself out. A moment from now, an hour perhaps, I'm once again blessed with the ability to walk, which he lost back in issue 280 when his spine was crushed by the Shadow King. So Jubilee says to him, I guess, for like anybody else that would be cruel, but you're the most tightly stitched dolt I ever met. I mean, not walking never seemed to bother you, standing, sitting. I mean, you still got the most powerful mutant mind in the world, right? That's got to mean something. But he looks down and the smile is off his face, no? So he says here, smiling again, and I like this layout here with the 3 vertical panels, and Professor X smiling, looking away, and then looking towards her in 3/4 profile. Nicely done. The grass beneath my feet, he says to Jubilee, to be able to stand straight and tall. All these are things that mean something, things I miss. There are times, Jubilation, I believe, with all my heart, that I would gladly exchange all the sonic abilities in the world for the chance to run, to walk again. So if you'll excuse me as he walks away. And of course, these 2 have no real history together. The first time that Jubilee met him was in issue 275, if memory serves, when certain of the X-Men were teleported by Lila Cheney to the Shi'ar Empire Star Cruiser, and that was the first time that she met him. So she has no history of being trained by the professor or anything like that. So she suggests if you're serious about experiencing the finer things in life, you ain't lived until you've bladed, as she produces these rollerblades from out of a bag. And then we switch back to Rogue and Gambit, and Rogue really is in something of a low mood. So she's unhappy with her life and a world in which she doesn't have a chance of finding happiness. So she says here, fine, life as an X-Man, I can deal with that. It's the personal side of my life where everything falls apart. All I ask, all I need is somebody to hold me, stroke his fingers through my hair, promise me that everything's going to be fine, that all the cuts and bruises are worth it in the end. More than anything, Remy, she says to him, she wants that person to be him. So what's he going to do? And again, we've got these 3 panels at the top of the page as we have a moment-to-moment transition here. Remy's hand paused above her shoulder. And is he going to move? Not. But she smacks him away. Takes a bit of a risk there because, of course, she could make skin-to-skin contact with his fingers that are outside of the glove that he wears. But she says to him, look, it won't happen because it can't. And then, of course, she explains about the nature of her power. And she says to him, and you got no control over yourself. Charging an object up and throwing it away, that's your special gift. She says she isn't an object, she's a woman. If you can't, you won't treat her like one, then please leave her alone. So he walks away. So his charm's not working tonight on Rogue. And then we switch back to Professor X with the rollerblades on, and he begins to get the hang of it. A little bit tentative about it, but then starting to enjoy it, as he says here. I confess the sensations are not unpleasant. So Jubilee has a little prank planned. She asks his forgiveness, and he says, for what? For this. And she pulls him into the lake. Okay, and then we're back with Warren and Hank in Harry's Hideaway, and they're reminiscing about their own times there. So this is a bit of a retcon. We never did see Harry's Hideaway in the original Silver Age issues of X-Men. Claremont introduced Harry's Hideaway into the mythos in issues of New Mutants, and he did then retcon scenes in the bar in backups to classic X-Men. So the two guys there just having some fun times, and all of this pretty good for Warren after the difficult few months he's had dealing with Apocalypse's transformation of him and his whole question as to whether his wings had a mind of their own or what was going on in terms of his identity. Basically, Hank saying to him here, your condition was something that happened to you. Okay, so it took you a while to get a handle on things. The point is you didn't let it destroy you. You even came through it all a stronger person. You really think so? Absolutely, positively. That's a Claremontism. Claremont does that with some pieces of dialogue, I think in Mojo Mayhem, if you take a look, and that is an issue I will be reviewing down the line on the channel. And then Hank says to him, hand on shoulder, I can't think of a person I respect more than you, Warren. And this hand on shoulder, this support, is a theme, a motif that runs through this particular issue. We'll see it again with our remaining characters. And then the guys are interrupted by a night watchman. And here's a little interesting detail. They have image inducers on them that automatically activated when, actually not a night watchman, but a police officer, when the police officer entered the bar. And they basically have a cover story that they are working in construction, that their boss has told them to work late at night. They're making a killing in overtime, and they've even got like a work detail to show the officer, so they were prepared for this. And humorously, of course, the name of the construction company is D&A Reconstructions. Get it? So Warren stifling a laugh there. So pretty nice little interactions there between those two old friends. And then we have the resolution to the Gambit and Rogue story. And I like the way that Lobdell has kept the dialogue and the captions to a minimum here. So he lets the art do the talking. So we're with Rogue on the roof, and Gambit brings a blanket for her and tells her, and this is kind of an emotional moment, tells her everything's going to be fine, Cher. Promise? And he promises. And we can see by the Marie Javins' changing colors here that the light is coming up, dawn is approaching. That's a nice bit of storytelling from the colorist too. And now we have Jubilee and Professor X tailing off from the lake. And we have a nice little bit of dialogue between them where Jubilee asks to make another confession. She says, you've never been like my favorite person. I always thought your life was just about hassling Wolverine, and this training riff in the Danger Room gets really played really quickly. So Professor X asks her, what's her point? And she says, I guess what I'm saying is, I mean, just hanging out with you and stuff. It's nice to know that underneath it all, there's like this vague semblance of a normal guy. So Professor X says, assuming that was a compliment, thank you. It's been a long time since someone accused me of being normal. And what happens now is he decides to get moving. He needs to get back to the mansion. She says, yeah, Prof, it was fun. In a parental bonding kind of way, she says more quietly. And then as she walks off, or he walks off rather, and we can see again with the colors here, the dawn light coming, sun coming up. He's struggling. So obviously the temporary effect of the the techno-organic virus is wearing off, and he's losing his ability to walk. And so she's thinking, observing him, can I say it, dweeb, she says to herself, just say, can I help you back to the house, right? Like a guy like him needs a girl like me for help. Look, whoever up there is in charge of these things, give the dude a break. It's only a few more steps, please. And you know, Brandon Peterson isn't the most talented at facial expressions, but this one really conveys, the emotion of her feeling about this. And again, all following on from her own confession that she doesn't feel close to him. And then we have some narrative captions here, but restrained. She doesn't expect a reply, but she receives one nonetheless, not with a parting of the clouds or in a brilliant flash of lightning from on high, rather in the actions of a single man as he struggles to keep himself upright. In that moment, Jubilee realizes she doesn't need to say the words aloud. She only needs to be there. And she goes and she supports him. Gives him a hand. His hand is on her shoulder, resting on her shoulder. So we've had that hand on shoulder motif run through all three. Hank's on Warren's, Gambit's on Rogue's, and now Professor X leaning on the youngest member of the X-Men, Jubilee. For one night in the life of Professor Charles Xavier, founder of the Uncanny X-Men, it is more than enough. And there's the wheelchair waiting in the foreground, and the sun's up. What a really nice issue. What a beautiful issue. And, Lobdell does a few more of them in the course of his run. Great combination of script, art, color. Excellent. Lobdell's best issue on the X-Books since he came on board. In hurried circumstances when John Byrne left scripting X-Men and Uncanny X-Men. And this really is a great issue. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments below the video. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review of this quiet issue, the epilogue to X-Cutioner song, Uncanny X-Men 297. If you did like the video, like it in YouTube, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.